The Oak Matrix Anchor 24 posits that we are currently navigating the end of a massive civilization-scale cycle where the friction we see in politics and society isn't just random chaos but a necessary rupture for a new alignment to take place. Joe Bandel calls this the 125% tension point, where the old structures of control, which he labels as DC systems, are pushed to their limit until they finally break. It's an intense way to look at the world, framing our modern stress as a kind of evolutionary compression.
It is a heavy framework, and to really understand Anchor 24, we have to look at how Bandel defines these systems. He views our current reality as dominated by these hierarchical, one-way DC or direct current systems. These are characterized by top-down control and fragmentation. In his earlier work like Modern Survivalism and the more esoteric Magister Templi, he describes how these systems thrive on fear and the manipulation of attention to keep humanity reactive. The central thesis of the Oak Matrix series is that we are shifting toward an AC or alternating current pattern, which is grounded in what he calls the loving embrace of opposites.
The electronic metaphor is interesting because it suggests a change in the fundamental frequency of how we interact. If a DC system is a rigid flow in one direction, then the AC system he describes seems to be about reciprocity and balance. But he mentions this 125% tension point. That sounds like a system that's about to overheat or explode. Why does the transition have to be so destructive according to this philosophy?
Bandel draws an analogy from biology and physics. Think of a seed coat. For a new plant to emerge, the pressure inside the seed must exceed the strength of the shell. That tension isn't a mistake. It's the mechanism of birth. He argues that the old systems of dominance, which use technology and subconscious influence to bypass conscious choice, are fighting a losing battle because the underlying field, which he connects to Gaia's own rhythmic current, has already shifted. The noise we see in the news and on social media is the old structure resisting that shift. It's the friction of the old trying to steer a current it no longer controls.
So in this view, the polarization we see isn't just people disagreeing, it's a structural necessity of the old system trying to maintain its grip. But Bandel puts the weight of this transition on personal choice. He says this isn't abstract and that it shows up in how we treat opposition. He asks if we will see the other as an enemy to defeat or as a part of a reciprocal process. That's a difficult pill to swallow when people feel like their fundamental rights or identities are being attacked. How does the Oak Matrix reconcile that real-world conflict with this idea of a loving embrace?
It requires a radical shift in perspective from duality as war to duality as a dance. In his book, The Oak Matrix Unleashed, he explains that duality isn't a problem to be solved, but a force to be integrated, much like the yin and yang. When he talks about the loving embrace, he isn't talking about passive agreement. He's talking about the ability to hold tension without shattering. He uses the metaphor of the oak tree frequently. It grows stronger because it withstands the storm. It absorbs the energy of the wind rather than just resisting it until it snaps. To Bandel, choosing integration means refusing to be siphoned into the fragmentation the old systems want. If you treat your opponent as a mortal enemy, you're staying within the DC loop. If you see them as the necessary friction that deepens your own roots, you're stepping into the AC current.
That sounds like a form of psychological survivalism. You mentioned his background in survivalist writing. It feels like he's moved from physical survival, storing food and water, to a kind of energetic survival where the thing you're protecting is your own sovereignty and attention. He mentions that the old systems are now using advanced technology to bypass conscious choice. Is he referring to the way algorithms and psychological profiling are used to nudge behavior?
Precisely. He's very concerned with the war for the mind of humanity. In his essays on the attention-energy dynamic, he notes that our energy is finite and flows wherever our attention is directed. If external systems can hijack your attention through outrage or fear, they are essentially harvesting your life force. Anchor 24 suggests that the ultimate act of rebellion is inner sovereignty, choosing where your attention goes and grounding yourself in your own connection to the earth, or Gaia, rather than outsourcing your authority to these external, control-oriented institutions.
The term Gaia appears a lot in his work. He seems to be blending a very technical, almost engineering-like view of the mind with a deep, organic mysticism. He calls it organic Gnosticism. How does this link back to the specific element he mentions in other anchors, like Oganesson?
That's where it gets truly unique. Bandel maps human consciousness and astral bodies to the periodic table. He sees Oganesson, the 118th element, as a kind of anchor for unity consciousness. But Anchor 24 is more about the transition period we're in now. He argues that the collective transition can be smoother if more individuals make the conscious choice toward integration. He calls these individuals sparks. Every time someone chooses to be grounded and embodied rather than reactive, they strengthen the new pattern. It's a bottom-up evolution. The old system is a dying hierarchy, while the new one is a living grove.
Let's talk about the practical side of this. If someone is listening to this and feeling that 125% tension in their own life, maybe they're stressed at work, overwhelmed by the news, or in a conflict with a neighbor, what does Anchor 24 actually tell them to do? He says the choice shows up in daily life.
It starts with a refusal to be a victim of the friction. In his sponge method, which he details in Volume 2 of the Oak Matrix Unleashed, he suggests that most people are like clogged sponges, operating at only 5% of their capacity because they're full of the dirty water of old stress and external demands. The first step is a conscious squeeze, an intentional release of that old energy. In a conflict, instead of reacting, you ask, am I trying to manipulate this person, or can I hold this tension in a way that allows me to grow? It's about moving from being a fragmented, controllable unit to a sovereign spark in what he calls the universal grove.
The universal grove is a powerful image. It suggests we aren't alone, but we aren't a monolith either. We are standing side by side, facing the same direction, but we are separate trees with our own roots. It's a middle ground between total individualism and the kind of forced collectivism he warns against in the DC systems. But there's a paradox here. He says the outcome depends on the choices we make, yet he also says the new cycle is already being born and the old system is no longer steering. If the outcome is already decided by Gaia's current, why does our choice matter?
The destination might be set, but the journey isn't. Think of it like a river. The current is going to the ocean regardless of what you do. That's the shift in the field he's talking about. But you can either swim with the current, which is graceful and integrative, or you can try to swim against it or cling to the debris of the old shore, which is exhausting and painful. Our choices determine the level of chaos we experience during the transition. If we cling to fear and external authority, we experience the rupture as a disaster. If we step into sovereignty, we experience it as a long-awaited alignment.
It reminds me of his work on the shock absorber method, where he talks about how intentional shocks can fire dormant nerves and unlock potential. He seems to be saying that the chaos of the world is that shock. If we meet it with absorption and integration, we unlock that other 90% of our potential. If we meet it with resistance, we just get broken. It's a very high-stakes view of mental health and spirituality.
It is. He explicitly states that the war for the mind is real. It's not just a metaphor. There is a genuine competition for where human consciousness will land. Will it land in a digital, controlled, fragmented state, or will it land in an organic, sovereign, and integrated state? Bandel isn't asking for belief in the new religion. He's offering a set of tools to navigate that choice. He says the Oak Matrix is a living path, not a dogma. It invites direct experience. You don't have to believe in the 118 layers of the lattice to feel the difference between reacting in anger and responding with grounded sovereignty.
One thing that stands out in Anchor 24 is the tone. Despite the talk of war and ruptures, it ends with a very gentle reflection. The womb is always open. The grove is patient. It suggests that even if we've been reactive or fearful, the opportunity to choose integration is always there. It's not a one-time test you can fail. It's a rhythmic pulse you can join at any time.
That's the essence of the loving embrace. Even the resistance is part of the process. In his translations of early German fantasy and horror, like the works of Hans-Heinz Ewers, Bandel often explores these dark, electric tensions. He doesn't shy away from the shadow. He believes that the shadow, The parts of ourselves and society we find difficult must be integrated, not just defeated. That's why he says this isn't a battle of good versus evil in the traditional sense. It's a battle of integration versus fragmentation. The old system wants to keep things separate so it can manage them. The oak matrix wants to bring them together so they can live.
It's a perspective that turns the current global instability into a kind of training ground. Instead of asking, why is the world falling apart? The question becomes, how am I using this tension to deepen my roots? It shifts the power back to the individual in a way that feels very timely. We aren't just waiting for the world to get better. We are the sparks determining how the new cycle is born.
And that's the final takeaway of Anchor 24. The transition is happening. The old DC structures are reaching their breaking point, but the quality of the new era, the AC pattern of integration and sovereignty, depends on the conscious choices we make in our daily lives. Whether we're dealing with a global crisis or a personal disagreement, the choice is always the same: fear or integration, control or embrace. The new cycle is already here. We just have to decide if we're ready to step into it.
It's a call to move beyond the role of a passive observer of history and become an active participant in this energetic shift. If this exploration of the oak matrix sparked something for you, share this conversation with someone who is navigating their own 125% tension point right now.